Welcome to the All-Star Planning Podcast. My name is Kelsey, and this is the place where I talk all things teacher lesson plans. Today, I am talking about a skill that is learned, and that is flexibility. Being flexible as a teacher in your classroom is 1000% a learned skill. It is not something that you are inherently or aren't inherently. It is something that you learn. It is something that you can grow to be better at. And I'll tell you, when I was a new teacher, I was not very flexible at all. If you listen to my episode on delegating things to your students, you would have heard, which is true, that I just wanted my students to sit like perfect little statues and let me do everything because I needed it to be done my way and perfectly. I am so far from that person now. And thank goodness, because being flexible is so much more fun. It's so much easier, and I'm a happier person for it, and I do less work, and things don't bother me the way that they used to, and I'm really happy about that. So I have a few tips to help you become more flexible, things that I've learned in my few years of growing to be more flexible. So here we go. The first thing that I suggest you do is anytime you are in a position where you feel really rigid and unmoving and this is the way it needs to be, and you're getting worked up about it and perhaps stressed out about it, ask yourself, is this important to me? Or is this actually important? I had to ask myself this question quite a bit because I would get very worked up about kids writing on things that they weren't supposed to write on, like group materials, or my decor being hung crooked, or kids drawing on it, or my desks being out of place, and things that weren't actually important. They were really important to me, and I had to figure out through asking myself this question over and over, what were the things that were actually important, the things that needed to get done or be done in a particular way so that my students could learn, and things that literally had no bearing on anything except for me and what I want. Two entirely different categories of things, although sometimes those things overlap, and things that are actually important should usually be important to you, but the things that are just important to you but aren't really that important in the grand scheme of things, those are the things that you need to work on letting go. And that's just like a pH test for a quick, do I really need to worry about this? So that's the first thing. Anytime you feel stressed out or worked up about something, ask yourself this question: is it important to me, or is it actually important? The second thing I recommend is to let your students do more. And I talk a lot about this in my episode, like I said, on things I delegate to my students. And this has been a huge help in me figuring out how to be more flexible. So when my students are doing things like decorating the classroom, or cleaning up, or handing out papers, or any of the other things that I would do my first year that I didn't actually have to do, I find myself with more time, and with more time, I am a happier person. I think all teachers would be that way. If we could like get a genie and have 3 wishes, it would be like more time, more energy, higher pay. I don't know. What else would you wish for? But definitely more time would be one of those things. And letting the kids do more will teach you to be more flexible. 100% it will. You don't need to hand out every single paper that your kids do. Let them do it. You don't need to, I would even, okay, we need the lights turned out. I would walk across the room and do it myself instead of asking the kid sitting right next to the light switch to do it. I don't know why. That seems kind of silly. It's just kind of like the control freak part of my brain. Ask kids to do things. They are willing to do things. And there's a bunch of stuff that I talk about in that particular podcast episode, and I definitely recommend that you go listen to it. But just in having your kids do more and you doing less, you will learn to accept kind of their B+ work as opposed to your A+ work, because B plus work, still good, still gets done, and it frees you up to do other things. So definitely start there. Another thing that can help you to be more flexible sounds a little counterintuitive, but this is to write less on your lesson plans. You still need to write them. You still need to guide yourself and outline what you're going to do, but you do not need to write it out like a script. When I was in college and I was writing all my entry-level lesson plans, and as a student teacher, and even a first-year teacher for a lot of it, I was writing my lesson plans like a full-on script. Like, I'm a movie writer, and I'm going to write this whole script, and Kelsey's going to say every single thing on this lesson plan, and if she doesn't, the lesson is a failure. Write less. It's the same thing I do for this podcast. I'll literally show you the notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, this is the notes for the podcast. This is how I write most of my lessons. So I'm up to the third bullet point that says write less on your lesson plans. That's halfway down the sheet of paper, okay? Just write yourself some talking points. I hope you audio people heard that through the microphone. My lesson plans, for the most part, are just talking points. So what happens is that I will pinpoint a few really good, deep, thought-provoking questions. I actually call them hot questions, higher order thinking questions. And in doing that, I really, really focus in on the meat of the lesson, and I will just write those. There was even a point in my teaching where I would just write those hot questions on an index card, because most of the lesson plan I already knew. I just needed those questions to guide me. And when I had those questions, I would be able to say, okay, in my brain, this is where the class is now. How do I get them to hot question number 1, and then number 2, and then number 3? And I wrote them in sequence with how I was teaching. And that was really good for flexibility, because every single class that you teach, assuming that you're in high school and you teach 3 to 5 classes a day, they are going to progress through your lesson a little bit differently based on how they're thinking. I mean, even the time of day. Kids, first thing in the morning, they're basically zombies, and then right after lunch, they're really rambunctious, and then at the end of the day, they can either be rambunctious or worn out. It can go either way, so that's like a coin toss. So in having just a few things on your lesson plan, writing less on your lesson plan, you can kind of just allow this lesson to go as it goes. And some classes are going to finish fast, some are going to finish slow, but that's kind of sort of what happens with more of just a guided lesson plan and less of a script. I 1,000,000% recommend that you do this probably starting your second year. Your first year, definitely like your first 2 to 3 months of teaching, I would say go kind of sort of with a script. I don't like the idea of script though, but maybe more bullet points. Maybe more than just 3 hot questions to guide you. Maybe you need 10 bullet points, and in between the hot questions you have like, we have to hit these 3 targets before moving on to the next question. The kids need to understand concept A, B, and C before moving on to hot question 2, however you want to outline it. But I think that writing less on your lesson plans can be helpful. Now, if you were writing so little on your lesson plans that they are completely unteachable, indistinguishable from any other plan in your plan book, that's not good. There's a sweet spot, and it's up to you to find it between your teaching style and your particular content. So that's just another way to be flexible. It's just not being so rigid in, we need to say this, we need to do this. It's okay. As long as the kids get the 3 hot questions, then they'll understand the bulk of the lesson. That's kind of where you want to focus when you write less on the plans. Okay, the next is to schedule in time for class discussions. So this is a big one with me, because I will let my students kind of run wild with basically any science question that they want to hear about. Things that come up in the news, random science facts that they hear about, or I don't know, random videos these kids watch on the internet. I don't know what these kids do in their free time, but I will schedule in time in my lesson plans for class discussions. So this is particularly true when my lessons are connected to real life concepts. The kids love to just talk about how science can connect to their lives when you make the first jump. So if I were to talk about, for instance, colligative properties, you sprinkle salt on the road so that the ice melts, right? That's the layman's explanation of it. But really, the freezing point of the ice drops. The air temperature is higher than the freezing point, so therefore the ice is now melted into water, right? When I bring that up to kids, they talk about their families cooking pasta, right? Because you also talk about the boiling point elevation, adding salt to boiling water. The kids will go on and on and on about this. And this is not even one of the best examples, but I will schedule, if I think this is actually going to take me 1 minute to explain, I schedule it for 5 minutes, because I know that the kids are going to just tell me random stories, and they work in a restaurant, and the restaurant that they work in now does it, but the one they used to work in doesn't, and blah, blah, blah. There are some topics that you know the kids are going to go wild with. There are some times when you actually are planning for a class discussion and you want it to be 5 minutes. Schedule it for 8 when you write your lesson plan, because there's going to be things that you can't anticipate, questions that are asked that you can't anticipate. Kids are going to bring up points that are just flat out wrong that you're going to need time to correct. So anytime there's a class discussion, I actually give myself 2 to 3 minutes more than what I think it's actually going to be. The worst thing that happens is you ask kids to make a prediction, and you use that to eat up some extra time that you had scheduled. Predictions are really great for science. I don't know what you can do in other subjects, but I'm sure there's something that you can come up with. You can make a prediction in literature and history. Ask a good why question, ask a good compare and contrast question. There are certainly things that you can ask to just fill up those 2 to 3 minutes if you find you don't need them. The final thing that I recommend to give you flexibility sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually to have a really, really, really strong curriculum. And hi, welcome to the All-Star Planning Podcast. That's what we talk about here. So if you have a very strong curriculum and a very strong understanding of your standards, and you have a good rough draft of what you're going to be teaching on what day and what time, you will kind of have an idea of how much wiggle room you have. So for me, I'll tell you, I'm teaching AP Chemistry for the very first time. By my approximation, I'll be done teaching the content by mid-March. So what that means is that we have the second half of March and all of April as wiggle room. So anytime a lesson, we get on one of those runaway train discussions that just goes on and on and on, I know it's okay. We have, 5 weeks of wiggle room. If there is ever a time, say I get sick and I'm out of school for a week, I know I don't have to feel stressed during that week. Oh my goodness, we're losing so much time, because I kind of have an idea. Okay, instead of having 5 weeks of wiggle room, now we'll have 4 or 3.5 or whatever it is. The same thing is true when you are planning like for a month. And like for me, I just had a snow day a few weeks ago, and my students were supposed to learn colligative properties that day. They largely do it as a review because they learned it last year. So for me, I said, you know what, forget this. I'm not going to put these questions on the test. We'll find another way to squeeze it in, probably with acid base, and they can learn it on their own for now, and we'll figure it out from there. I can pick up that lesson and move it someplace else on my calendar where it fits in better. Not better, but where it also fits in. And we'll get to it when we get to it. And I know that I have the ability to do that because it's kind of drafted on a calendar. I didn't just lose a day. I just need to get creative and scrappy and find a way to take the snow day lesson and plug it in somewhere in the rest of the year. So when you have a good outline, and it doesn't need to be like super firm, it just needs to be a rough draft to the point where it's mostly reliable. It's better than a coin toss. That's what you need. You need a curriculum that's a little bit better than a coin toss, and then you will be able to be more flexible because you'll know, okay, this didn't go the way, even if you have to like reteach a lesson. If you teach a lesson and the kids don't get it at all, I've been there plenty of times. The kids don't get it at all. Now you just say, okay, I need to find some place to reteach this and squeeze it back in. For me, my kids a lot of the time have a hard time with the difference between melting and dissolving. I don't know why, but they do. So when I teach it as during like my matter unit, I teach it the first time around, and then it comes up again during the solutions unit, and they get to see it like a little bit differently. So I'm reteaching it under a different lens. You know what I'm saying? So when you have like this basic rough outline, you can kind of figure out where things fit in for you to reteach them. So that helps to add a feeling of flexibility. So those, I think it's 5 things. Those 5 things can be really helpful in being more flexible, because when you're flexible, like, you know, the English teacher can take all the kids on a field trip and it's not that big of a deal because you know you'll get around to it. So that's what I have for you in terms of flexibility. Again, flexibility is something that you learn. It's something that you grow to be better at. There are some things that you should not be flexible with. Your behavior management systems. There are some things that you just can't be flexible with. And part of being a good teacher is evolving and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And you got to change with the times. According to my retirement plan, I'm supposed to teach for 40 years. So I have a lot left. If I am teaching in 2035 the same way I am now, I'm not going to be proud of myself. If I'm teaching in 2050 the way I'm teaching now, I will definitely not be proud of myself. You got to learn to change and evolve with the times, with everything that's going on, and with different kids. Every single year you get a group of different kids and you got to tweak everything a little bit different. And being flexible is part of enjoying that evolution in that process. So that is it. If you are interested in learning the basics of the All-Star Planning Method, I have a free masterclass. You can find that at plan.kelseyreevy.com. It'll show you, it's me, it's the 5 pieces of the All-Star Planning Method all kind of together to help you build that that strong curriculum and get yourself a good rough draft so that you can feel less rushed and a little bit more organized and grow to be a little bit more flexible. And subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss anything. New episodes come out on Tuesdays. If you are listening to the audio, you can find the video on YouTube. And if you're here watching the YouTube video, you can find the audio basically everywhere you listen to podcasts. All right, that's all for now. Have a great day. Happy planning, and talk to you soon. Bye.